Why do bad things happen? I mean, if there's a good, all-powerful God out there, why is the world filled with so much suffering? This is, without a doubt, one of philosophy's oldest, deepest, and most difficult questions. And today, we're diving headfirst into this puzzle, the problem of evil.
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of it, laid out more than 2,000 years ago by the Greek philosopher Epicurus. It's such a perfect, brutal summary of the dilemma. Is God able, but not willing to stop evil? Well, then he sounds kind of cruel. Is he willing, but not able? Well, then he's not all-powerful. But if he's both, then where on earth does evil come from? This is the core conflict we're going to unpack.
So, to really get a handle on this ancient riddle, we first have to get our definitions straight. Because, the second you start looking closely, you realize that philosophers don't just lump all evil into one big, messy category.
On the one hand, you have what's called moral evil. This is the stuff we humans do to each other. This kind of evil makes us ask, why doesn't God just step in and stop us? But then, you've got natural evil, things like diseases, earthquakes, tsunamis. This questions the very blueprint of the world. I mean, why build a universe with these kinds of natural disasters baked into the system?
Okay, so philosophers tend to attack this from two main angles. First is the logical problem. This is a pure logic-based argument that says a perfect God and the existence of evil are a flat-out contradiction. It's like a square circle. It just can't work. Then there's the evidential problem, which is different. It looks around at the real world and says, look, the sheer amount and the horrifying types of suffering we see make it incredibly unlikely that a good, all-powerful God is running the show.
And in the 20th century, the philosopher J.L. Mackie just sharpened the logical problem into this razor-edged point, the inconsistent triad. Think of it like this. You can believe any two of these statements. God is all-powerful and all good? Fine. But then evil can't exist. God is all good and evil exists? Okay, but then he must not be powerful enough to stop it. You can pick any two. But, Mackie argues, you absolutely cannot hold all three at once. Something has to give.
So, how can faith possibly stand up to an argument that clean? Well, the first major defense, what's called a theodicy, basically shifts the blame. The argument goes that evil isn't a flaw in God's plan, but the terrible yet necessary price for giving humanity our most valuable gift, freedom.
The classic version of this comes from the theological heavyweight St. Augustine. He argued that God's creation was originally perfect. Evil wasn't something God made. For Augustine, evil isn't a thing at all. It's just the absence of good, the same way darkness is just the absence of light. So where did it come from? From us, from the misuse of free will by Adam and Eve. And, he argued, we all inherit the guilt from this original sin, which means that natural evils like diseases and disasters are actually a just punishment for humanity's fall.
So for Augustine, it's as simple as it is severe. God remains perfectly good and perfectly just. The world is broken, not because of a design flaw, but because of us. In this view, our suffering isn't some deep cosmic mystery. It's justice being served.
Now, fast forward to our time, and the philosopher Alvin Plantinga gives us a modern update. He asks us to imagine a world full of perfect little robots, all programmed to only do good things. Would that world have any real love, any real virtue? Plantinga says, no way. A world where we can freely choose to be good is infinitely more meaningful, even if that freedom means some of us will choose to do terrible things. For him, the risk of evil is worth the reward of genuine freedom.
All right, so the free will defense sees evil as a kind of tragic consequence. But what if it's not a consequence at all? What if it's a tool? This next defense flips the script entirely and argues that suffering isn't a bug in the system, it's an essential feature.
And this chart lays out the difference perfectly. The Augustinian view is all about looking backwards. We were made perfect, then we fell, and now evil is our punishment. But the Irenaean view looks forwards. We were made immature, and evil and hardship are the things we have to overcome to grow and develop spiritually. One is about justice for a past crime, the other is about training for a future goal.
The philosopher John Hick really fleshed this out in the 20th century with his soul-making theodicy. His idea is that the world is basically a cosmic gymnasium for our souls. I mean, think about it. How can you develop real courage if you never face any danger? How can you learn genuine compassion if you never see anyone suffering? Hick says God allows the world to be a tough place so we can forge real virtues by choosing good when it's hard.
But there's a really important catch for this whole soul-making thing to work. Hick calls it epistemic distance. It basically means God has to keep his distance. He has to stay somewhat hidden.
Why? Well, if you knew for an absolute fact that an all-powerful being was watching your every move, your good actions wouldn't be truly virtuous, right? They'd just be you trying to stay out of trouble. For our choices to be genuinely good, we have to make them in a state of uncertainty. So you've got the free will defense and the soul-making defense. They both sound pretty compelling in theory, but they both run headfirst into a massive, emotionally powerful counterattack, the problem of suffering that seems to have no point at all.
I mean, really think about it. We can sort of understand how overcoming a personal challenge makes us stronger. But what about the kinds of suffering that don't teach any lessons? The kinds of evil that seem utterly random and meaningless?
This is often called dystheological evil, a fancy term for purposeless evil. What possible virtue is a fawn learning while it's burning to death in a forest fire? What soul-making is happening for a baby who suffers and dies from a horrible disease? This kind of suffering doesn't feel soul-making, it feels soul-breaking.
The Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky just perfectly captured this feeling in his book, The Brothers Karamazov. His character Ivan poses this absolutely devastating question. He says, even if all this suffering leads to some perfect utopia in the end, is a system that's built on the tears of one tortured child morally acceptable to begin with? His answer is that he would respectfully return the ticket.
So we've seen the problem, we've seen the main defenses, and we've seen the powerful emotional critique. But there's one last logical twist in this debate, one that attacks the very foundation that both defenses are built upon.
You see, both of the major defenses, the one from Augustine and the one from Hick, they both rely on this core assumption, that our will is genuinely free to choose good or evil. But this final argument asks, what if that idea of freedom doesn't actually make sense?
J.L. Mackie, the same guy who gave us the inconsistent triad, comes back with this final killer argument. It goes like this. 1. Our choices flow from our character, from who we are, right? 2. We didn't create our own character. 3. An all-powerful God could have created us with characters that, while still being free, would just naturally always choose the good thing. Which leads to the conclusion, 4. God could have created a world that had free will but had no evil.
This completely reframes the debate. The issue is no longer that God had to make a tough choice between creating free beings and creating a world without evil. According to Mackie, that was a false choice all along. He could have had both. So, why didn't he?
And so, in the end, the problem of evil seems to turn back on us. It forces us to ask questions not just about the nature of God, but about the very nature of our own freedom. If our choices come from a character we didn't choose, then who's really responsible when those choices lead to evil? And that question, that's what lies at the heart of this ancient, and maybe just maybe, unsolvable riddle.